Love it. Hi, Matt.
Hi,
Welcome
Addie.
to Where the Climate Things Are. Thank you
I
for
love
being
this.
here.
I'm gonna pretend we didn't have a full conversation for the last 20 minutes before this. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm just honored because I've wanted to be part of Where the Climate Things Are since I first heard about it, and I'm a fan. So this is really special.
Oh, wow, that means a ton. And as someone, you are someone that I admire greatly in the podcasting, storytelling, media creation space in climate and beyond. So it's very cool to have you. And I feel like our friendship has newly blossomed since I've launched. Like we got on the
Uh
phone
huh.
in like
It was
January or something, I
January.
want to say, because I think I reached
Mm-hmm.
out to you right
Yeah.
around when I launched it, which was December. And then, like, flash forward, we're on a panel that you're moderating in
Yeah.
April at
SF
SF
Climate Week.
Climate Week. Well, so this was
Mm-hmm.
okay. So this was the compliment that I wanted to give, and I was gonna
Oh,
wait to record this. Was I just feel like it's
I'm
so
blushing.
fun. I was saying to Matt before that I love interviewing interviewers because we both, we know kind of both sides of like what it's like to ask someone questions and then to also, answer those questions. And it was so fun sitting on that panel during
Mm.
Climate Week. So this was a Project Drawdown panel. It was like Monday. So it was one of the first days of Climate Week, I want to say.
Yeah.
Morning,
Monday.
I think.
Yeah. Monday, first
Um,
thing Monday. I want to say like
yeah,
11 a.m. on Monday morning. And it was like this beautiful venue, the Melody in San Francisco.
beautiful.
But our panel, and I don't know if I was shocked because I did see registration numbers, but like it was standing room only at this
I
place, like
know.
probably 200 people just there to hear us as we started the day for a
Well,
lot of
because
them.
we had such a rock star panel that you assembled. I mean, I will say, like,
You were on
at
it.
this point in my life, I know, and I appreciate that. And I was just about to say, like, I feel like I've gotten through a lot of imposter syndrome. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of it
Mm.
in my life, and I'm at a point where I've worked hard to be like, I have to like actively talk myself through some stuff, but I'll be on that panel. Like, I was sitting there and I was like, instead of being like, I shouldn't be here, I was way more like, I'm here. How cool is this? Like, soak in
Hmm.
this moment, etc. But that panel, wow. Some like complete rock star, like looked up to these people for a lot of my life, So I
But
was trying to keep it cool.
I think that's the cool thing, though. It was a good one, just because I want to get back to imposter syndrome. But
Mm,
it was cool because it was you, of course. It was
mm-hmm.
Christy Drutman, aka Brown Girl
Totally.
Green, co-founder of the Green Jobs Board. Cesar Cordova, one of our Drawdowns neighborhood
Yes.
San Francisco Bay Area interviewees,
So
who works
cool.
with an organization called CalWave. Louis Sahoyas, who was a Nat Geo photographer. He made
Crazy.
You Are What You Eat on Netflix. Like, Netflix filmmaker on our panel. Like, what? That was
Oh, and
amazing.
he's made his filmography is long. I mean, he
Yes.
has made
Extensive.
and or
Yeah.
been involved with like many documentaries that I think many folks listening will have heard of. We
Yes, and then
can link to
also
those.
I have to shout Masika Henson, who's just like so
Yeah,
powerful in terms of her own filmmaking. She's a DJ also, which I just
I
think is cool.
know.
And I think for me it was so cool to have almost like an unlikely storytelling panel where, of course, some of us
Hmm.
have more background. Like Christy has a podcast, you podcast, of
Hmm.
course. You know. But Louis, we talked about his credentials. Masika mentioned hers. But then it's also interesting because Cesar, like Dungeons and Dragons, like a dungeon master through that, which
Yeah.
I'm like, it's nice to have unlikely diverse perspectives coming together. And I am just really thankful for those opportunities to do that. But I will also say, one thing I love about a good panel, and even just about the work I do to transition to imposter syndrome, is like
Good
it's
transition.
nice to feel like I'm not standing alone in doing this work, even if it's like
Hmm.
doing this interview with you and having this conversation,
Yeah.
because like I definitely still experience imposter syndrome. And I think something I've realized and really embraced and been able to articulate more recently is that like it's possible to have courage and show up with courage even if you don't have the full confidence in something. Like you could still have the doubt and still push forward. And I've almost realized that as I show up in different spaces, I want people to know, like, yeah, I still have imposter syndrome. I still have doubt. And I'm still doing it anyway. Like, and we could all do that and still be those people. So it's nice when we could be like vulnerable and own those things, especially in a world that that often like discourages that, or, you know, pushes us to not be human. Right.
Right. Oh my gosh. Wait, I love this. Yes. This is that was like a really great piece of insight about imposter syndrome that I'm going to keep with me. Like
you don't need to have it all figured out. And the people who, and I think this is one reason I love interviewing, is that the people who we look up to, we just think that they're so great and perfect and capable and flawless. And then, you know, through conversations I have, I'm like, oh, we're all in the same boat. Like we have doubts, we have challenges, we have barriers. Like I often talk about my dad's story in my work, and I'm sure I'll mention that here. But like one of the lessons that two lessons that are kind of like sort of tattooed on my wrists. I mentioned the word courage because that's one word he used to describe me.
No way.
Is courageous. About a year before he passed away. And I kind of hold on to that to like remind myself of my courage, or to try to have that in moments when I don't feel it. But also the other word I have tattooed on my wrist is lemonade. And people are like, what? Do you just love Beyonce's album from whatever year it was? And I'm like, no, well, yeah, but take lemons and make lemonade. And so many of us have these lemons in our lives, these challenges, these barriers, but like our job in thinking about our stories and how they lead into our superpowers is not to like look at the lemons and then put them away and hide them. It's to figure out like how do we navigate with them as part of us. So showing up fully is what it is. We're getting deep. I love it though. I love it.
I'm so glad we're recording this, because I'm like truly going to go back and listen to what you're saying about these things. Like this is going to be my morning pump up, you know, like
I feel like this was our first conversation too, because it was probably like 90 minutes that we were talking, but I don't even remember the detail. It went so many places.
It went so many places.
And thanks
I'm
for
not
creating
surprised.
that. No, and well, I'm not, because you create that comfortable space. And then
thank you.
When someone does that, I'm just like so many people looking for an excuse to have a comfortable space to just like show up and be you and share your story. And so thanks for that already. 7 minutes in.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, yeah, already is right, because I haven't even, if you can imagine, I haven't even landed the compliment that I was going to give you about SF Climate Week yet. So we're going to keep going back to that, because then I have to bring it forward to the Climate Strides event that you joined. But the thing I was going to say was that I learned so much from you as a moderator that day. Period. That is the compliment. Like your moderating of that panel was different than I had seen. And I loved the way that some of these compliments are going to sound a little basic, but I'm going to start broad. So you were so, of course, like welcoming and inclusive, and made us all feel at home on that stage, which was pretty like, I definitely felt nerves in that room because it was so big and beautiful and standing room only. And I was like, okay, here we go. But you've made it feel so comfortable. And so I also love what you said about like having a lot of people, a lot of different backgrounds represented. It was these sort of like, sure, these accolades, like the Netflix filmmaker, but then you also have, someone who's like a dungeon master.
Dungeon master.
I don't even know like that's but that's another way of storytelling or relating to community and creating community. And then I think the thing that I pulled from it too, that was like a little more logistical, was just how to moderate in a way that felt not like, Matt, this question is like to ask everyone down the line. You were like popcorning with personalized questions. Like you changed the way that I moderate from that panel. So that was what I wanted to tell you. like
I really
eight,
appreciate that.
9 minutes later from our
No,
conversation.
that's on
Yeah.
me though. Because I'm like, wait,
No,
let me insert my own point of view into your compliment. But
no, I
I really
love it.
appreciate that because
Yeah.
I think that, like, especially, I appreciate that one, just in general, coming from you. But, there's so many things I could say. One, though, is that just in terms of creating a comfortable space, like I know what it's like to feel the nerves and feel uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
SF Climate Week, and this is something I'm working on, but it was one of those times where there were so many moving parts. That morning, I was with John, guest of the
John,
podcast,
shout out.
like
Yep.
at Black and Climate,
Yep.
speaking right before. I was like the speaker right before,
Yeah.
and then I rushed out of there before that was even over to get to the venue for the event, and then I'm already thinking like, okay, there are slides, I'm giving a little talk, but then I have all these panelists coming. And so I feel the nerves. I don't think I question anymore like how well things will come together because of my experience doing them and knowing like,
Yeah.
well, I'll make it work. It's all okay. If anyone falls on their face, like we create a human environment so that we could get back up and everyone could be like, yeah, we're
Totally.
there for you. We lift you up together. But for me, I know what it's like to feel those nerves. And so I just like to be able to check in with people where I can. But then also, just the dynamic, like the group of people was really phenomenal and
so
made
great.
it really easy. And then, but I do think a lot of it comes down to experience. And I point that out because, like, I was going to say, as a young Black queer person, I feel like I often use those as like my shorthand identifiers, but like especially as someone who like I still get carded places all the time. And I'm like, I am 33 now and I've been like doing the work I've been doing, dedicated to it inside of work and outside of work for like at least the last decade. And so I just like when like the hard work and dedication, because clearly I put myself into my work very fully and vulnerably at times, and I just like I like when I really appreciate when on the other end people are like, wow, that was like something I wasn't expecting, because I'm like, that's what I've been working on, because I'm someone who probably like you and most people, I get really disengaged by panels like that are overly formulaic, or I've been on them and I'm like, this feels so awkward and the transitions aren't there. But to have kind of a conversation and to flow and, even like being able to affirm what someone's saying, but then know the right way to transition to someone else's thing is good. And then you all were so great as panelists, because I'm sure something that I said leading up to, it's like, I want to feel conversational. And you all were set up and ready to just receive whatever it is. So you might make a comment where I'm like, oh, that reminds me of Cesar. And then I could transition to Cesar. And it sort of played like, I'm not a sports person really, but like quarterback, that's probably what they do. Something like that. So I could play like a quarterback and like pivot it around to different people. So I really appreciate that. And it's like, it's fun to not be on stages alone, especially when you're talking about like passing the mic and representation and all these other things, which could sometimes feel really vulnerable, especially depending on what audience you're in front of,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we will get into all of this. It was so great to like hear some of these things from you, because again, as someone who is learning, like I said this to my partner recently, I was like, I actually don't get nervous anymore for being interviewed. It's when I'm interviewing people, like even for these, I still get a little bit like, oh, okay, I gotta like, and I think the better, like this speaks to what you just said about knowing your guests plural or guest, and when you are able to then like you making a transition from something I say to Cesar is like, both of us. So that's like your ability to do that is also kind of in the research you've done or in the like ways that your guests, like that's hard stuff. And I think I realize more and more how hard it is to like moderate or interview, hard meaning like there's a
Yeah.
there's like a difficulty, or like you can put in the time to make those interviews easier, if that makes sense. Like if you research your guest, if you know the people you're talking to, like forward and backward. And sometimes obviously there's going to be moments where we sit down with people we don't know as well.
Totally.
Even with all the research, like there's some people I go and look around for, and I'm like, oh, there's not much on this person like online, which is like kind of cool too, because you're discovering as we go and whatnot. But anyways, I feel like I'm learning how to do this
I love
better.
that. And I will also say like the part that I feel like I learned like relatively early on, and this might be like around the time that I started just doing my own interview project in 2017, which was called 108 Degrees of Impact at the time, but then I changed it to Let's Care. And I learned like, oh, research, like you gotta do the research. But then I think what I've realized more recently in the last, like, let's call it 5 years or so or something like that, it's like, oh, there's the other part where you could research and have all the information and be prepared, but creating a comfortable space goes, I don't want to say so much further, but that's almost the other side of being prepared from like the standpoint of, you not asking me like, Matt, what's your name? Like, like enough things going into it so that I feel seen and the guest feels seen, but then also to create a comfortable space where it's like, yeah, there's a lot that I won't know, don't know. It's okay. We'll flow.
Right.
And again, like there's a lot of forgiveness or understanding that I feel like interviewees have even given me, where it's never turned into like an awkward or tense situation, because there's just like understanding and like assuming best intentions. That idea of like, Matt's coming from a good place, Addie's coming from a good place. Sometimes we could all be awkward humans. Like that's human. Being human, right? So
every day.
I love this. Yeah, I should probably let you get to like any questions or actual thoughts.
I was gonna say,
conversation.
Me too. Okay, well, I was gonna say this is gonna sound like a funny question after everything we just talked about.
Sure.
But I do, on the note of what you just said, I did want to ask you to introduce yourself.
No, I love that.
People that don't know who you are, or like
I love that.
what you, not even what you do, but like how you identify, like however you want. We always ask, who are you on the trail ahead? We're like, introduce yourself and take that in any way you want to today. So I'm going to ask that to you now.
I love that so much, because that's the first question I ask in all of the Drawdown's Neighborhood Climate Solution Short docuseries interviews that I do, which is like a kind of a funny and intense way to start an interview. But I do it anyway because it gives someone the space to like self-identify. But hi, I'm Matt Scott. My pronouns are he, him. I am young Black queer person. I am someone who like grew up in New Jersey, lived there my whole life, like youngest of 4. My parents were, like my mom was a college professor who taught all the different topics in the world of like sociology, world religions, Africana studies, Jewish studies, like taught courses on the Holocaust, taught like social inequality, all these things that like brought home these really deep dinner table conversations. And I feel like that in so many ways shaped me. And then my dad and his work and his story, I mean, really, it was like when I was about 12 years old that my dad shifted from working in the tech world to becoming someone who started a home healthcare business, honoring his mom who passed away due to Alzheimer's. And even though my dad passed in 2017 with a rare form of leukemia, my mom and sister have continued to run that and bring that forward. And so it's like that legacy of just not only where my parents have played into my journey, and I'm sure there's so much more to say, like on the front of ancestors and the like, and how they've informed me, really shapes me. But I am, a storyteller. I think I've gotten more comfortable like describing myself as a change maker, not just someone who loves to interview them, but like someone who's like aims to make change through storytelling and probably has done that in some ways over the last decade. I am Yeah, I'm there's so many descriptors. Like I think of being an uncle to the two
Mm,
most amazing nephews who are 3 and 6. I think of like all these other things. And that's the thing that I love about storytelling and even the question of who we are, because it's so big. It's so expansive. I could go on and on, like podcaster, all these other things.
yeah.
But on paper, I always like to mention, and this kind of goes back to like being a young Black queer person, is that like prior to my current work, which is at Project Drawdown as the director of storytelling and engagement, I was I had a really well, I would say like a really awesome career working at this organization called Second Muse, which was
Mm-hmm.
my avenue to work with a ton of different clients and partners. And so my biggest project there on, in that work over that 5 years was as the global community manager and storyteller of the world's largest global hackathon event, NASA's
Cool.
International Space Apps Challenge. And
You have a
like
little space apps thing behind
Oh,
you.
yeah, that's like from one of the local
I
events.
love
Like
it.
that's
I love it.
yeah, that's from one of the local events in Huntsville, Alabama that they gave to me. But it's so cool because there's that like I had it's kind of mind-blowing. Because like I guess it was like really early in my 20s, but like getting to work with the Obama White House was a thing I got to do. Like getting to work
Wow.
with the USAID program, with like the Australian government, having all these different journeys and travels where I get to be around and meet and learn from change makers really has been a defining thing for me. And it's, as you know, Addie, like it goes far beyond just the work I do, but it's deeply a part of who I am, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of
Wow.
who I am.
Oh,
I'm so glad I'm not asked that more because that's a big question.
isn't
And I'm
isn't
sorry
it
to
funny when
anyone I
like
ask it.
yeah, exactly. I have a friend who has a podcast in the running space.
Yeah.
They're very, very successful. Actually, my partner edits this podcast, so that's kind of the full
Mm,
disclosure there. But so I'm very biased. But Dylan asks everybody, what makes you you? At
mm.
the beginning, like the first question, what makes you you? And man, I'm glad I've never been asked that because I would be thinking about that answer for weeks beforehand. I've never been on the pod, so terrifying.
Yeah,
But
no, I'm not even
interesting.
going to try. But yeah,
I'm
what
not gonna
makes me
ask
me?
that.
I mean, it's like, it's all the people, all the
Yeah.
experiences, all the most. And you know what? Honestly, if I had to answer that question, I'm just going to say in short, uh
Hmm.
definitely oversimplifying, but it's like probably the like curiosity and the ability to ask questions, because there's so much that I guess I've sort of realized my brain functions. It's not like it functions, I don't, definitely not differently than a lot of people, because I found a lot of people who are like-minded, who I connect with, who are similar. But
Yeah.
like it's interesting because I've just realized that there are certain things I'm not as great at processing, like being in the climate world. The sometimes my eyes still gloss over hearing like the science described in a certain way, or
Mm-hmm.
like data or statistics or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's, what makes you also makes me think of this idea of superpowers, which I often talk about. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of my superpower, is that I'm curious. I have a lot of questions. I don't necessarily understand things in the same way that other people do, but then I could use that as a bridge to help bring other people in. And so that's one of the
Definitely.
things that makes me. That's a big question.
It's a big question, isn't it?
It's
I'm
a
just
good
putting
one though.
that to a fellow podcaster as like, isn't that cool that's
It, that
that's
is
how he
cool
opens
though.
it. Yeah,
It's
it is.
cool. I like it.
It's interesting. I mean, I think we'll get into this too, but I think what you just said about explaining data and climate science, I think I would wager a guess that a small percentage of folks in the climate space or even who are interested in climate actually understand what like the science behind it or kind of when someone explains it, and that's why I think storytelling, well, this is my this is my thesis
Yeah.
and theory of change, but like I think we'll get into this, but I'm very excited to ask you more about like why we need storytelling in the climate space, because it's so, I think that's like how this podcast started, right? my partner and I were chatting. He's a trail runner. He's an outdoorsy person. And, so am I. And I love the outdoors. And yet there's sort of these two communities of almost imposter syndrome of like, outdoorsy doesn't mean you're like summiting mountain peaks and like on the cover of Outside magazine. And also like climate action and climate advocate doesn't mean you like have a degree in it and went to school to study it and like are a scientist. Like there's these two kind of merging of communities that like I want to talk to people who like love walking in the park and care about nature and climate and want to like take action. And I think a lot of people don't, myself included, because I'm the same way as you. I'll bring it back to me, like to like my vulnerability here. Like I also will not know what I glaze over. I've heard data explained to me in science, climate science explained to me so many times, and I'll still be like, I think I understand, but like I feel like if both of us who are pretty in the climate space aren't fully grasping it, or we feel that we don't fully grasp it, like a lot of people probably won't be either. That's kind of why we need this. Yeah.
Well, and that's why we need the people who aren't just the like, and I say this lovingly, like the climate nerds or the people who are super proficient in this. We need people who can be those bridges, who can ask the right questions. And I will say, I really admire so many great climate communicators who really help me understand. But even at Project Drawdown, our executive director, John Foley, he's a scientist and just a great leader and communicator when it comes to this. And I have never once felt confused by anything. In fact, like, there's so much that I've learned just by seeing him talk about this and hearing him talk about this, or just being in conversation with him about all these topics, because it's so clear. And I think we could all benefit from, that's a whole other conversation, I think, to have with him about kind of how he got so great at that. But, I think we could all benefit from learning to speak with various audiences and people who just don't get it, and also who are not afraid to look us in the eyes and be like, what you're saying doesn't make sense to me. Could you, explain that in a way that's more narrative, or with analogies or metaphors, or just more simple language that people could grasp? And so I love when people are able to like bridge their perspective with others, because that's one of the powers of storytelling. It helps more people connect. Like that's the point, the basic point of it.
Totally. Oh, there's so many good, like, I love talking to you. This is so fun. This is such a pleasure. This is such a privilege to be able to sit with you and talk to you. Seriously, Matt. I'm going to ask you a question that was one of the prompts at Climate Strides. So to like fast forward through our friendship and our moments of connection this year, which feels like they're more than they are. Like, it's like I've actually only been in person with you twice, but I'm like, what? Wild. That's crazy, because I feel so close to you. Which is a testament to also you making people feel comfortable as well. The one of the questions, so we had Climate Strides was in the one you joined was in LA at the Hollywood Climate Summit. We made it work. I think I was so appreciative because you also had a call that we were trying to get you to, and you made it work. And I was so appreciative that you were there, and your talk, it's funny, it's like I call them speaking moments, because calling them speeches again kind of like goes against the whole vibe of that. But your speaking moment was so powerful, right on the top of Baldwin Hills. There was like this lookout, that we were all kind of right around. And one of the questions I ask speakers to talk about is your aha moment on climate. And I'm very excited to ask you this, and I ask everyone this on the podcast. So you'll kind of see like the speaking prompts at Climate Strides mirror my prompts for guests on the podcast. And that's kind of how I came up with them in the first place. But Matt, what was your aha moment on climate or environment, would you say?
Yeah, it's interesting because I really do, and I'll talk about this sometimes. I remember being really a fan of Captain Planet and the Planeteers as a kid, which, if I was exposed to that when I was just growing, like I was a baby, a toddler, like a little kid, even seeing it in syndication. And so there wasn't an aha moment for me of being exposed to the issues the planet was facing in the climate, or, when I even thought of that question that prompts for Climate Strides, like there wasn't really like an aha moment for me learning about these things. And then I think about other times, like in high school, but even in college, where there were these different initiatives or student organizations or community initiatives that would bring people together around climate. And they were, in my experiences for where I was, and this also comes from being, I think, in many cases, like one of the only Black people in those spaces as it
Yeah.
was, that I just saw, like, I perceive those as not being for me. And I think it's because so many of those groups were so white. And it's interesting because
Yeah.
I don't even think I fully realized how much the climate movement, so to speak, would mirror a lot of that. But I just didn't see that as being for me. And I also probably didn't, at a deep scientific level, I got like climate change and global warming, and we were exposed to that. And I feel like, like Nickelodeon and some of these other things would like
So
give
good.
you PSAs about these topics that you would know something about them. And probably Bill Nye the Science Guy, who knows? But like, there's all this, and yet I just never felt connected to it. And it was in 2019, or no, it was 2018, that I saw one of my friends who's like, "Oh, I just went to this climate reality project training. Like, you should really go to
Oh.
it." And I'm like, "Oh, me?" Like, because I was doing some work that related to ocean health and other sustainability topics, but I never saw myself as a climate person or even truly a sustainability person.
Interesting.
And I was like, "Oh, okay." And there was a climate reality training coming up in LA. My sister had just moved there not too long before that. And so I went and stayed with her and went to this 2,000 person, largest at that point, climate reality project training,
Huh.
2.5 days or something like
Were
that.
you working at NASA, or were you working
I
at Second
was,
Muse with
I
NASA at
was,
the time? Okay.
yeah. And
Interesting.
so it's interesting though, because I went and the, like my biggest memory from that, and it was a like diverse group. It was more diverse than I remember it feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And maybe not like overall across the room, but even like seeing like the group picture with my little group, I'm like, oh, there's diversity too. And I think part of it was like so
Yeah.
many of the people who were there were really climate people. So I felt a little isolated or on the margins that way. But then also, there weren't a lot of speakers who were from Black communities, Indigenous
Yeah.
communities of color, and the like. Al Gore was up there for so long, sharing like 500 plus slides on so many things, and I was like, "This is so important," and I just feel so disconnected. And then a panel came up on stage on the topic of climate justice and community power, and it included a
Okay.
number of people, like Mark Lopez, who's doing incredible work in the LA area, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, who has done incredible work in this space, Catherine Coleman Flowers is also incredible in the environmental justice space,
Cool.
and then
Yeah.
Naleli Kobo, who I feel like I'm seeing her name and face everywhere now, but like youth activist who like was years younger than me at that time. And one, to like see Naleli specifically on stage talking about her activism, talking about how the things she experienced, including like having asthma because of being in an environmental justice community. And I'm someone who had asthma, like having childhood cancer because of her experiences living in an environmental justice community. I just really resonated with her, but also thought like if she could do it and I could do it, I have all this like experience that I could bring to this work. So there was that. And then with Mustafa on stage, he really, and this definitely informs my work to this day, but he was big on the idea of power. And I will never forget, like he had us all stand up and had everyone in this room of 2,000 people holding hands. So we were all connected, like everyone was connected, which is surreal. And he's like, he just had us like say the word power and lean into that and kind of let us in a bit of a meditation around that. But like that for me was the moment where I was like, okay, I could do this. I could be part of this. And what's so funny about it, and I'm looking for my climate reality pin
I know, I'm
behind me
looking
on
back
my
there.
shelf. I don't see
It's
it, but
there
it's
somewhere.
it's up there. But you know, I wore that at an event that happened later that year, and I happened to meet someone who coincidentally worked at Project Drawdown at the time because I had my client reality pin, because we were both client reality leaders. That was my intro to Project Drawdown.
Cool.
And then, you know, a couple of years later, they were hiring for this storytelling role, and I applied, and the rest is history. The rest is
So
history.
cool.
5 years into my time at Project Drawdown now. But yeah, it was
Wow.
seeing people who looked like me and
Yeah.
seeing people who I connected with, and even just hearing the topics of like humanity and community centered as opposed to an afterthought.
Yeah.
Representation and justice centered as opposed to an afterthought, that had me think like, oh, this is for me,
Wow.
even though the conversation often leaves these pieces out. So I try to
Yeah.
bring those to the conversations
Yeah.
that I have and that I put out there in the world.
It's the stories too. You heard stories that you were like, oh, I see myself in this movement. Like,
Mm-hmm.
see, we always talk about that with Trail Ahead, and Faith and I talk a lot about like seeing yourself outside in the outdoor recreation space. And it's the same with climate. I mean, that's why these are all so fascinating to watch. These conversations kind of mirror each other, because if we don't tell stories that showcase a lot of different folks in these spaces, then it just continues to be homogenous. And like we talk a
Yeah.
lot about like the difference between the storytelling, like genuine storytelling, and tokenizing, right? Of course, there's like so many things that we need to be, well, especially as like a white woman, I always am wanting to be like very careful of. But at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm like jumping to, as you know, I sent you like themes and questions, but I'm like jumping to the end of what I wanted to ask. Of like,
Sure.
I love the fact that you say you're like in your bio everywhere. You say passing the mic, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm passing the mic and I'm shining a light on other voices and other folks. And I also love that you said at the beginning of this, you are starting to think of yourself as a change maker and not just the folks that you interview. And I love that,
Totally.
because I was reading this and like formulating things I wanted to ask, and I was kind of like, well, wait a minute, this is so interesting, because Matt himself is someone I want to pass a mic to, right? Like, so I was almost like, that's such an interesting thing here, where like you passing the mic is phenomenal, and especially for folks that like see someone that looks like them in you, maybe are like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for this mic. Like I receive it with more like comfort, a space of comfort than maybe I would have. But that's almost why like converse, or like on the other side of this, I'm like, well, but Matt, here's a mic for
Yeah.
you. Like that's why I want, and so
I do
how
feel
does
like I
like
should, to that point. I feel like sometimes I have thought like, should I change my name to Mike, like MIC Scott? Like it would just make things so much easier
I
for
did almost
everyone.
just say
No,
Mike instead
it
of
happens. And then there's like Michael Scott from The Office, which has always weirdly been a thing
oh,
that I've
funny.
gotten. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird. But yeah,
Michael
Mike's
Scott.
Matt,
Oh
Mike.
my gosh. Matt and
Yes.
Mike. Well, Matt with the mic, we could
Yes,
really play
I
around
love
with
that.
this. Yeah. But like, yeah, I guess like I so appreciate how that has become a part of what, who you are, what you do. Like you're also a
Hmm.
podcaster, which we can get into more, but like why and how did that become such a core tenet of yours
Oh,
as you got into this work?
it, it's funny because it, like, not even as I got into this work, like it's always just been something that I've needed.
Yeah.
And to kind of go back to childhood, like I realize in retrospect, Captain Planet and the Planeteers, I really resonated with and loved. Power Rangers, I was like
Yeah.
core demographic for that. The X-Men was another big one
Mm-hmm.
for me. And there's other stuff going on and on and on, but it's like looking at these ensembles of diverse heroes, I realize in retrospect, like, oh, I really always connected with folks where you could just see a diverse range of powers and people showing up. But also because like so often in my real life growing up, as you know, as I grew into adulthood, but also even now, I just didn't see that representation there. So what's fascinating is that I thought of myself as a storyteller before that was even an official job title of mine.
Yeah.
Very early in my career, like I thought of myself as passing the mic before that was officially part of the work that I do
Sure.
now. And so it's just something that I've felt that I've needed. But I will say specifically, I think on the phrase of passing the mic, I sort of adapted that from an interview that I did back in 2019. I went to the San Francisco Bay Area with one of my teammates at the time, who I still am able to work with, Eric Dowds, who's this incredible filmmaker. And Eric and I went to the Bay Area, and he didn't even know what he was getting into. I'm like, okay, here's your plane ticket. Like, this was outside of work, but I was just like, here's
in
my
life.
passion. Yeah, it was just life. I was like, here's your plane ticket. Like, I have the place for us to stay. We're going to be there for a week. And I took a week off from my job at the time. And over the course of that week, interviewed, along with Eric's help, especially helping with some of the filming, like interviewed 21 change makers over 6 days in the Bay Area.
What? 21 over
Area.
6 days?
Yeah, 21 over 6, Tenderloin to Sausalito to Oakland to Palo Alto, like all over the place. We didn't even have a car. Like, it's funny that we were just on foot in retrospect, because I'm like,
oh my, that's like a,
what were we thinking?
feat. Were you filming all of these interviews?
Filming all of it. And it's this film that's out there called 20s and Change San Francisco. You could find it at let's.care/film. That's the Let's Care website, which is still up, but let's.care/film. Like, it's been featured at a few film festivals. But there's the reason I bring this up is because one of the interviewees at this roundtable that we did with this great organization called the Black Female Project, which I'd say is based in Oakland, but has a community all over the place, is one of the interviewees, Cheryl Evans Davis, who was with the SF Human Rights Commission at the time as the executive director, like mentioned or brought up this question of like, what can we do to share the mic? And I feel like there's something for me that really jumped out about that. Probably because it resonated with what I was already thinking and talking about. But this idea of passing the mic evolved in part out of that in a lot of ways. Like, how can we pass the mic to voices and stories and people and communities that often go unheard, and not in like a patriarchal way, but also in a way that's just like, yeah, let's give people space to be at the table, and especially people who are not at that table. So I often say passing the mic to voices that often go unheard. But I've really, whether it's, my own identities, whether it is the work that I've done as an interviewer, it's been out of like necessity for myself to see myself, to feel seen, to feel comfortable. And just to like, to like understand myself or see what I can be, right? To overcome, I won't even say overcome, to navigate the imposter syndrome and doubt and all these things that especially folks from underrepresented groups, whether it's your gender or race or sexual orientation or ability or whatever it might be, like so many of us don't see ourselves. And it's helpful to see other people actually doing it, to be like, oh, I could do that too. I didn't realize that because I didn't see people who looked like me doing it. You can't be what you can't see is a big phrase I've heard. Yeah.
It's interesting you used a couple sentences ago, you used patriarchal, because I feel like there is this interesting balance between like literally I picture a table and I picture like moving over, even if it's one spot that I'm sharing with someone else. It's like creating space, welcoming more people to the table. Maybe I'm not at the table anymore. Like, it's like these great metaphors for how do you make sure that like the folks that need to be in the room that are making decisions or whatever you want to say, or like voicing their lived realities, are there. And, the like passing the mic, shining the light, opening the door, however, like whatever metaphor helps to frame it is so real, because like I think there's also in like the outdoor space, like sort of parallel here, a lot of, there's a lot of conversation around like, well, but what if like someone doesn't want to be in the outdoors, or like what if you like don't want to like go camping or whatever, and you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I'm not going to force anyone to do that, but like it's almost like you can't be, we can't see, like celebrating. Actually, our first ever guest on the trailhead said that, and I'd heard it, but hearing it from Danny Washington, who's the marine biologist, incredible
Mm-hmm.
mermaid, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
she was our first guest, and her saying that was like, yeah, I'm not saying that everyone has to like be in the ocean all the time, and or like that all Black women have to go into this profession, but like what a cool thing to be able to have like little Black girls see me, like to see someone that looks like them doing this work. And like I'm kind of saying that for Danny because she didn't say it in those words, of course, but I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's like, yeah, that's real. And so I think there's this like invitation, I guess, that I'm so like
Yeah.
fascinated by and wanting to cultivate. It's never a, yeah, like a forceful thing. And it's more like
No.
showcasing storytelling, like being able to elevate amazing stories of folks who are already out there, or and it's also like, but sometimes folks can't like access that table if you don't if you don't create a space, if you will.
Well, and it's like, to take it a step further,
Yeah,
one,
go.
I mean, I would say that it's like when I talk about passing the mic, and even when I think about tables, uh,
Mm,
it's like specifically
please,
talking about
yes.
tables, like the
Yeah,
furniture.
yeah.
I just like, there's so many. I would almost say everyone has a mic and everyone has a table, but
Mm,
they're different mics and different tables. Like, and it's
mm,
also interesting when we talk about different topics, sort of who most pressingly needs to be at the table or who's left out of the tables, right? But
yeah.
I like for people to also remember that like each of us has, I mean, especially those of us who have like networks of people or relationships or social
Right.
media or whatever it might be, like we have a mic that we're able to use and pass to folks. And it might not seem like enough, at times to be like, I'm just going to reshare what the great work that Addie's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But like that helps reach more people. That helps, that's passing the mic in a way.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to give someone else space to share their story on my little platform. That matters. That matters,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I will
Yeah.
also say, to your point, I'm also probably one of the first people who will be quick to mention, like, yeah, we don't need to force a relationship with the outdoors for people, because I've gotten that question a number of times in talks and workshops and panels and stuff like that, where some people have said to me, what, like, how do I get my students or my kids or my whoever to love
Mm.
the outdoors, and or how do I get these other people that I don't know to love and connect the outdoors? And I'll kind of like jokingly say, but it's true, like, yeah, I grew up with like I still have horrible outdoor allergies
Yeah.
depending on the season, like asthma, all these things. And then
Yeah.
also there's something else that I became aware of really talking with a number of people, Black people in particular, through Drawdown's neighborhood, including Whitney Terrell, who at the time was working with Minnesota
Mm.
Interfaith Power and Light, now is with the Sierra Club, a Black woman in the Twin Cities. And then I think of Ashia Ajani and Grace Anderson in the Bay Area. Shout out to Grace
Yeah.
and Ashia. Grace, who of course is on the trail ahead. Like, I realize that like there's sometimes fear that many of us as Black people have in these spaces, and I didn't even realize that.
Yes.
So I was sitting down with, I think it was Whitney at first, and she mentioned like being outdoors as a Black woman, and I thought to myself like, wow, that explains like a lot of the anxiety that I have as a Black person outdoors
Yeah.
sometimes. I could just have anxiety of like, but what if someone sees like a Black man outside and they think I'm sketchy or whatever? And like, I
Yeah.
don't, these things could be hesitations for us being outside. And rather than like brushing past them, it's good that we honor the hesitations that people have
Yes.
and just
Absolutely.
like
That.
help people navigate and find their way of showing up in the ways that we need them to, rather than checking all the boxes that we want them to, even though we don't like need people to be in love with being outside just to make an impact when it comes to
No.
our climate and environment and the outdoors.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the whole like origin story of the Trailhead is, which I don't even know if we've talked about, but like was Faith and I sitting in a car on the way to like a trail run. And, you know, she would sort of be like, well, yeah, I mean, but you know, like the connotations of like me as a Black person in the woods. And I was like, what? You know, I had no and I'm very open with this. You've heard episodes of Trailhead. I'm really super open about how like ignorant I was to all of this. And I think like that is a privilege as well. And yet like getting to talk to Faith, getting to hear her stories and she's also like, you know, an educator. She wants to do this. Like that was another big conversation was I was like, if you don't want to like hold white people's hands, like let's not do this, right? Like, you know, and she was like, no, I'm down. Like I studied this and I want to do it. And that was the birth of the Trailhead, was this like interracial dialogue about these different topics. Anyways, and I think the safety piece was something that like I didn't get, and I didn't know. And I was so grateful that she shared that. And then immediately I was like, I want everyone else in my white outdoor community, or I'll say it, the outdoor community that is very white. I was like, I want everyone else to know this, because I'm sure that a lot of people do not, you know? And that's like, and it's interesting to hear you have your like your own aha moment about that, for your own sense of like, oh, this explains a lot of the anxiety that I feel maybe when I'm outside, or like, you know, like, and then there's allergies, and there's, you know, there's all these pieces that come together to be like, it's not, well, yeah, because we say like, oh, the outdoors is for everyone, which it could be.
Sure.
But like, right, sure. It's like, yeah, it's not. And I think that like, that was like part of the reason I feel like I had like, I'll share this. Faith had not many people, if at all, like reach out to her. Well, I mean, like people were like, oh, great job, this is cool. But like not a lot of people in her community were like, wow, I had Matt like so many white friends be like, what? Whoa, like this is crazy. And we were always laughing about this because, like I had like so many people reach out to me with like surprise and asking more questions, super engaged audience on my side. And Faith would be like, yeah, it's crickets on my side, which is sort of so funny because I think we figured this out, where it was her community of, I guess there's like folks of color in the outdoors were like, yeah, like, yep, like kind of like, this is great to see Grace on the pod. But it was kind of like, yeah, we know all this stuff. Whereas like my white community, where they were like, what, this is crazy, you know? So it's sort of, that's like, that was the point of the Trailhead, was to like unlearn, right? Like help us all together unlearn, or like get uncomfortable, be faced with it. But it's I mean, as you might imagine, it's a very white audience we have on the Trailhead, which is interesting.
Well, I also just want to comment though and mention that,
please,
you know, you mentioned that this like, and it is rooted in privilege to not understand. You've mentioned this, you said this, but I also want to say that I feel like conversely that not having that understanding or perspective is like the opposite of a privilege, because it's a disadvantage to not understand how multiple people, or how different types of, how a wide range of people show up and interact with these spaces. It's a, you know, it's a limitation. Like you're not able to see the ways that other people experience the world, and that is a disadvantage. And so I feel really grateful to, one, like have my lived experiences coupled with the relationships and connections and community I've formed, coupled with the interviews I've done also in the climate world and otherwise, that have helped me better understand different points of view and experiences in people. And that is an advantage. And I just wish that more people who don't get outside of their privilege bubble, like I feel bad for them that they don't, I feel bad for them in the world that they don't take time to like get outside of their lived experiences or lived experiences of people like them. And so, you know, I feel great, Addie, in terms of like the fact that like I'm able to like digest and understand that there is always going to be an endless amount of questions and experiences to understand and to familiarize ourselves with. And there's so much that I don't know that like it's good to be in a place where you're not surprised that you're learning something, because I mean, I'm almost surprised when I know things at this point, because I'm like, whoa, there's so
I
much
love
to
that.
learn. There's
I
always
love
so
that
much to
about
learn.
you. You're
I appreciate
so
that.
curious and so inquisitive, like asking those questions and always wanting to learn more. I love that. That's such a good, like, I'm more surprised when I know something at this stage.
I mean,
Like, I think
yeah,
that's really cool.
I mean, that's a whole other thing, it's because
Yeah.
especially as a Black person in particular, I just feel that we don't actually, for so many people, let's widen this out, like our ways of knowing, I was thinking about this just the other day, that like our ways of knowing, or the like what we know is often limited to academia. It's often limited to more technical STEM based topics, which are insanely important. Academia is important and it matters, and all these other things that are I would say like based in all of these tenets that have kind of formed the more destructive systems we've had. Those are fine, but also there are other ways of knowing, like your gut, your intuition, your ancestral history, your lived experience, all of these other things. And so I think in part through interviewing people and connecting with people and seeing them honor their different ways of knowing, I've started to do that more for myself and acknowledge like, okay, there are a lot of things that I know at this point, and life evolves, the world evolves, so you keep learning. But
It
it's
does.
important that we
Yeah.
also validate where we are, because there are a lot of people out there who just don't like who are not from like a diverse range of or not from diverse backgrounds, I'll say overall, or backgrounds that are not normally represented, who like don't question themselves and they don't have that perspective on the
Right.
world. So it's
Right. I mean,
here
you
we
need
are
to have, here we are. And you
questioning
need to have
ourselves.
the questioning ourselves always. No, I mean, that's such a good way to put it. And okay, so now I'm gonna start to steer us with specific questions, which has not been what
We'll
I've
go
done this whole time.
wherever.
Well, no, so you work for Project Drawdown. I came across Project Drawdown, I think, as a lot of people did. They like released this book. There was like, there's 90 or 100 or however many, maybe more than that, solutions for drawing down carbon. And that was sort of the premise. And I was like, what is this? This is so cool. I got the book. I was like all in. I was like, all these different solutions from like soil health and nature-based solutions, which we might kind of expect, all the way to like refrigeration and like also educating women and girls. Like there were so many cool solutions around like how do we like ultimately draw down carbon and like mitigate climate change. So I would say Project Drawdown is a very well, you can disagree if you want, but like I feel like it's a pretty scientific, like it was like it came into my like purview as like a
Definitely.
very science-based sort of like think tank, just a nonprofit, but like really almost academic to what you just said. And then Matt, you introduced this beautiful, like we Drawdown's neighborhood is really what I want to ask about, but like in general, I feel like you joining the team, and I say this as someone who like I was familiar with your work more recently, but like I'm sure you had this influence. I mean, you've been there for 5 years. Like I'm sure the influence of you was interspersed throughout Project Drawdown, and I didn't even necessarily know. But talk to me a little bit more about like what it was like to kind of come on board of a very science-based, data-driven organization and start to infuse storytelling, and then how Drawdown's Neighborhood came about, because I love that series so much.
Oh, thank you. And I mean, Project Drawdown, since starting at Project Drawdown, and we've definitely evolved a lot over the last 5 years, kind of meeting the moment, meeting what the world needs. But we've always described ourselves as the world's leading guide to science-based climate solutions and a resource for people to use really to help them take meaningful science-based climate action. And so it's interesting because there are three pillars at Project Drawdown that we are rooted in and focus on. There's the science, which is all about like how do we advance the science-based climate solutions and strategies that our world needs. So how do we like root things in what our world actually needs to make progress on this and to advance climate action. Then there's the work with stakeholders, which has really been focused on like engaging different key stakeholders and empowering like bold climate leadership with like a lot of the different systems levers, whether that's policymakers, community leaders, philanthropists, investors, businesses, all these other folks. And then the third S, because you've noticed the science, stakeholders, the stories is the third S that we have there, where it's really about telling those human stories of solutions and action. So helping people see that not only are the climate solutions and the science and data important, but like the stories of how people got to that work matters so much. Because from my perspective, the reality is like we are, each and every one of us is a human. We have motivations in our work and in our job titles and roles, sure, but people at the end of the day are motivated by their own purposes, by their own missions, by sort of, and this is borrowing from the Japanese concept of ikigai, which is for the reason for being, and also Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson's climate action Venn diagrams. But people, like I find, do their most purposeful or best work at the heart of like what brings them joy, what they're good at, and what are the problems that they want to solve. That's where you kind of find that purposeful action. And so for me, the storytelling work that we do is not only about like shifting people away from the doom and gloom, which so often, especially in mainstream narratives, it is doom and gloom and how horrible everything is and catastrophe and disaster and apocalypse. But shifting to this other half of the story, which is about what people not only can do, but what they are actually doing each and every day. And the way that I approach the storytelling in particular is let me help people connect with like these real world everyday heroes in their communities, which is what you see in Drawdown's neighborhood, where at this point it's been 60 plus climate heroes, local climate heroes who I've interviewed. And I should also say, like, it's really with this idea of showing that these quote unquote heroes are everyday people, that being a hero is not something exceptional. It's kind of like the difference, going back to something I said earlier, between like Superman or Batman or Spider-Man and then like the X-Men or like the Justice League or Captain Planet and the Planeteers, where it's like we could all show up and have our own superpowers to bring to this table. And that's what I want people to get across through the stories I tell. So I always start with the question, who are you? And what I love about that is that oftentimes people bring various identities. It might be their queerness, like it might be their race or identity on that perspective. It might be being a mom. It might be their interests and hobbies and passions otherwise. It might be a million different things, but those are the things that people connect with. And I love helping people see that the people who are taking action are just like them. Like, and some of them aren't even super adept at the, I should say this, that some of them, their role isn't the science. They trust the science. They're guided by the science, just like I am. But like they leave the scientists to really incredible scientists and let that lead the way. And their stories are so much more full and powerful. And like that's what I bring to the world, recognizing that we need to be able to not only see ourselves, but we need to also be able to see others in order to show up in like what I would love to be a leaderful movement, like a leaderful movement where people all are able to make an impact rather than kind of waiting for their neighbor or someone they see on TV or on the news, on newspaper, whatever, making impacts. Like we all could be those heroes. And I'm really proud of how Drawdown's neighborhood has helped people see and understand that they have a role to not only discover solutions, but take action and make an impact in their community, whether for one person or 10 people or, a whole town or city, or for like our broader world.
And 60 interviews sounds like it's nothing, given that you did 21 in 6 days way back when. So to me, I'm like, that's a lot of interviews. And also, you do these in your
I've
sleep,
never thought
Matt
about
Scott.
it like that.
I was like doing
I've
the
never
math. I was
thought
like,
about it like
oh,
that.
so he did 21 in 6 days. He can do 60 in like a week.
21
right?
change makers over 6 days. It was 14 interviews. It was really exhausting. But I will say, actually, a lot of the times when we do the Drawdown's neighborhood interviews, it'll be a couple weeks of filming in a particular place, because we filmed in Pittsburgh, Atlanta, the Twin Cities, New Orleans, like the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, the San Francisco Bay Area, and then most recently Los Angeles, with more stories to come. And it's interesting because I've learned a lot about pacing myself with stories. And one of the great teammates that I work with, Josna Harris, who's the founder of this organization, Change Narrative, she's been a great partner. She's coached me on my own story, has really introduced me to this idea that I want to say it's from someone she worked closely with, who kind of talked about this idea that with stories, it's important to stay prayed up, is what the person said, or like take care of yourself along the way, regardless of like your religious affiliation or what that looks like. It's a lot. It could be a lot. And I was really exhausted after those 21 interviews over 6 days in 2019. But then have learned with time how to like pace things and give them each the space they need, and also take care of myself and make sure there's space to like take care of the interviewees and others along the way too. So it's 60 highly produced episodes of Drawdown's Neighborhood, with the LA series coming out this fall, beginning with like this launch we're doing around World Food Day in October. So that's exciting. Cool. Exclusive.
Wow.
But it's
this just in.
This just in. But it's really it's been really cool to be able to build what we've been doing with Drawdown's Neighborhood, and maybe to the point of like people's voices mattering. Like every single person who even is listening to this, like if you're listening to this and you tag me on LinkedIn, tag Project Drawdown on LinkedIn, show some love, it goes a long way, because I mean, the stories that we highlight through Drawdown's Neighborhood, and maybe you were going to ask about this, but like they are in that spirit of passing the mic to voices and stories that often go unheard, and they are mostly featuring Black communities, Indigenous communities, communities of color. I'm so proud of like how much queer representation, non-binary representation we've had. It's mostly been women that have been featured in Drawdown's Neighborhood by far, which I'm also really proud of. And they're normal, everyday people, and so it's hard to at times like get the amplification and platforms needed. I've been so thankful to platforms like the Weather Channel, Nat Geo, like anyone who's ever brought me in for a talk or workshop, Hollywood Climate Summit, who really make space for the work we're doing. But we really constantly need more help to amplify these stories, especially in today's world where it just not only seems like where so many of these voices and stories are under attack.
Absolutely.
So every single thing matters. Like everyone sharing and doing what they can matters. Good. So please like tag me and post about Drawdown's Neighborhood, and people will be surprised. Like sometimes how few people will do it, because people don't realize like you are the one I'm talking to. Like, I know you'll do it, Addie, but like
no, but like
you, the listener, and it's like don't expect that someone else will do it, because that's kind of one thing I've learned is that oftentimes we wait for someone else to be the hero when that's us. Like that could be us. Don't wait for the hero that you need. Be the hero. And show up to be the hero for others, rather than kind of like the bystander effect thing of like, oh, someone else will do it. It's like, no, we need you. We really need you.
Yeah.
You. And yes, listener.
Definitely, yes. And let's just say, like, to go back, my joke was Matt did 21 interviews in however many days, and yet 60 fully produced episodes high quality video. I've seen these. I mean, it is no small feat what you've accomplished with this series. So hats
Thank
off
you.
to you guys. I can't wait to see the LA component launching soon.
Yeah.
I feel, it's Josna Harris, actually, Tori Stevens just introduced me to for Climate Strides in Climate Week. Like the whole family is together. So I can't wait.
I love her and Tori Stevens. And it's so funny because I just want to say, it's cool to meet your heroes. Like when I met or was like properly introduced to Tori last year, that actually led to a collaboration with Gris that we had at SF Climate Week, and it's still talking with them and collaborating with them, including on some stuff leading into New York Climate Week. And it's just cool to feel this world be so much smaller. Like up until even like, let's call it 2 years ago, so that's like 3 years into my time at Project Drawdown, like I felt like still like an outsider looking in at times, where I'm like, oh, there's like, I'll name names, but like there's Christy Drutman, like Brown Girl Green. She's so cool. Like I would love to like know her at some point and to be part of her work, and I admire what she's doing. And then, you know, soon after, like I'm sitting down and we're sitting on a couch, like doing an interview for her podcast. And like, you know, it's nice to be connected and in community. And that's one of the things I love about interviewing. That's like one of the amazing things about us being here. And I only wish there were more hours in the day to spend time with all the cool, amazing people. But we'll figure that out one day. We'll do like a big retreat of like a thousand of the coolest people coming together.
I love it. I hope
in some remote island place or something like that. Just fantasizing.
Okay, let's put it out into the world. I love it. Let's go.
Central, so that we don't need to fly to it. But you know,
we'll find the right spot. We'll find the right place. Somehow Colorado, but not, you know, but an island. Somehow. You know what I mean? Like the equivalent of two coasts.
Maybe it's virtual. Not. It might be virtual. It's virtual.
As we're saying this, we're like, oh, maybe. One thing that
please.
Was very intriguing about you for me was that you had podcasts on the side of your day job. Now this is me too, right? Like this is how I've always been for the past 4 years. I had this stuff going on the side, and then, you know, had these other kind of focuses. Like I always would call it like my 5 to 9, my 9 to 5, my 5 to 9.
Yeah.
How, like, tell me about those podcasts. Are they still active? Are you a producer? Like how does that kind of play into, because it was funny, like when I met you I was like, oh, but Matt's seems to really dovetail and like everything makes sense. And I had felt like I was sort of living this dual life of like, over here I'm this podcaster, but over here I'm like working for this team, you know what I mean? So
it's all valid,
I'm just curious like how that has played. I mean, it's sort of an obvious possibly like teeing you up here, but I'm just sort of like, it's so cool that you also had these passions that you were like, you know, expressing and living into on the side, as well as like your day job, if you will. And that's sort of a like a very dichotomous way to look at it.
I'll use this as an excuse. I'm gonna go through like a few journeys here, I'm gonna like use this to get in a lot of things. But basically, and by the way, I will just say, like, you know, I think that like doing something in your full-time work that's different than what you do outside of it can be just as amazing as doing something, doing things that are so aligned with who you are. So that's a whole other conversation. But, you know, I really started doing that like 5 to 9, so to speak, back in 2017, truly when, I mean, it was after the like presidential election had happened in 2016, and I just felt like a lot of people needed hope. So I started this blog, 108 Degrees of Impact, like writing up these stories of people or change makers that I witnessed, some that I knew, some that I didn't know, some I'd interviewed, some I hadn't. And then my dad passed away in early 2017. And I often, as I did at Climate Strides, like share his story, which I'll just share in short here, of like him being a Black man growing up in the civil rights era in Prince Edward County, Virginia, at a time when Black students and white students went to school separately. And they in 1959, when my dad was in high school, they closed down all of the schools rather than integrating them. And long story short, he moved away from home, like lives with white strangers in such a contentious time,
Mm.
graduated from high school, which is not something that could be said for a lot of the other Black students
Yeah.
who were out of school in that 5-year time that the schools were closed. And then graduated from an HBCU, Howard University here in DC.
Nice.
Like, he became a captain in the military, went to Harvard Business School, graduated from there,
Wow.
met my mom there, and they started a family, like all these other great things. And when he passed, I kind of realized how not only his story, but like the story
Wow.
of Prince Edward County was often overlooked, and that we just don't have enough people like given spaces to share their stories. We don't ask people enough questions, even like interpersonally. And so I went from like writing this 108 Degrees of Impact blog to then interviewing people. July of 2017 is when I launched those. And I
Wow.
kind of didn't really look back. I just interviewed people over Zoom. They're still on YouTube, I'm sure. A lot of them probably have like 15 views. Some have like 150, 300 views
Yeah.
probably. But like, it wasn't about that. It was about me connecting, and I think often like finding myself through interviewing people, because my dad was like my best friend and such a close person for me in that. And so interviewing became this like very therapeutic and soothing place for me to refine myself and my power, especially interviewing these change makers. And so there was that. I mentioned the 20s and Change film as part of that. But back in 2020, on top of my incredible, outside of all this, like reality TV fandom and just TV fandom in general, I applied to become a podcaster with this network called Rob is a Podcast, which does like TV, reality TV, scripted TV, all of it.
Okay.
And it was right after the passing of George Floyd that they were like, hey, we want more diverse voices in this space. And so I applied, I was accepted. Like, they took me on as a podcaster. And like, you think of, when you're thinking of reality TV, or at least the shows that I might cover, be like Big Brother or Survivor, all these other shows, right?
Interesting.
But where I sort of found my niche within that, which is still continuing on, is with 2 shows. One of them, which is really in the Survivor realm, is called The Pride Has Spoken, which borrows from Jeff Probst, the host of Survivor's catchphrase when people are voted out, the tribe has spoken.
Yeah.
And so The Pride Has Spoken is highlighting and interviewing queer people in the who've been on Survivor, and highlighting their stories, because when you're on TV, you don't have control of that edit, and often your story does not get told. And so giving people that space, that's been something we've done for a few years during Pride Month each year. And then I also have another show called Pod Friends, where I've interviewed a few dozen people at this point, but it's interviewing people who are within that reality TV community, about them and their stories, not about the shows, but about like, who are you as people? And it's been really cool to interview some people who've been on the shows, but also like other podcasters or others who are adjacent to that world. I could imagine in the future even interviewing some hosts of these shows about who they are and the like.
Yeah,
and so
that would be interesting.
it's cool. And what's nice about it is that like there's really a community around it. Like, for instance, I'm drinking out of the Pride Has Spoken mug right now.
Whoa.
And it's like there's like there's some
There is
merch
a
around it too. It is a huge community. And I think that's what's so cool, is like when you allow people to nerd out about something like reality TV, like for Rob is a Podcast, they'll have live shows and live events that they do where sometimes it'll be like 1,000 people who come together for these things, or hundreds of people who come together for like a Survivor watch party, and then they just are like bonding and getting to know each other and connect. And I think what's been so cool is through what I've done, which is more on the human side of interviews, like I've been really able to connect with people about representation, about identity, about grief, about even about the work that we've kind of been talking about here too, So yeah, it's been awesome, and it's a different world, but it's like adjacent to what I do in that it's that human storytelling, connecting with people, interviewing, and then also like not trivializing things, because a lot of people will look at reality TV or TV in general and be like, that's so dumb. But like
Yeah.
to be in a community of people who like could see these characters or people portrayed and represented, and then have like hours long conversations about why they matter, or what like different storylines or social issues and all these other things that
Oh
happen,
yeah.
social dynamics. Like I love being part of that in my own small little way. But it is such a side quest, because it is like, you know, like 8 episodes of Pod Friends I'll do per year, 4 episodes or 5
Yeah.
episodes of The Pride is Spoken.
That's
So it's
great.
like on the side a couple times. I'm a seasonal podcaster, but
I
it's
love
still,
it.
it counts.
That's the dream. That's the dream. That's
It's
great. It
nice.
does
And
count.
I have really found too, because I have, you know, between those interviews with people and then Drawdown's Neighborhood, obviously I scratch a lot of itches of interviewing people.
Yeah.
But I admire like what you do too, because I have thought like, oh my gosh, like I want to interview even more people. But I realize I do interview a lot of people as it is still.
in
So,
different ways, on different platforms. Yeah.
But no, it's nice to have those excuses to connect with people still. And so
Absolutely.
don't be surprised if I start interviewing more people. Otherwise, who knows?
Interesting. We'll see. Okay, I'm obviously completely taking you up on the fact that you were like, I don't have a hard stop.
Oh, no,
Let's see
I
where this
don't.
goes. But I know, I love it. No, I mean, this is
but
like
your
we're on like
listeners
an
might-
endurance. Yeah, the listeners might be like, whoa, we need to do this in a couple
Yeah.
parts. Okay, but I have 2 questions left, and
Please.
then we're gonna cut it, even though I
Sure.
don't want to ever.
That's sure. That's
well,
what you
but I
think.
think-
But
Yeah,
we're gonna keep
right.
going for hours.
No,
Yeah.
it's gonna be like yeah, exactly. Okay, I think I don't even know how to ask this, because I don't usually ask this question, but I feel like a lot of listeners that we just referenced are in the like outdoor recreation community. So that's kind of like where the climate things are, merges like the trail ahead world a little bit, like the, if you will, like the Venn diagram of these 2 podcasts is like the outdoor space, and then where the climate things are like really digs in more to climate action in the outdoors. And I think like or like adjacent to the outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, just as we didn't even really get into, I know, but this was sort of on purpose. Like I did send you that theme, but I never really, asked you specifically, like, what is your relationship to the outdoors, or what is your relationship to nature? But I'm not even wanting to do that specifically. I feel like what I'm curious, from you, who I see as an expert in climate action and community galvanization and like making people feel comfortable, is like how can folks who are listening, who a lot of them care so deeply about the outdoors and nature, like kind of like what can we do, what's like a call to action or something that you would give folks who are like, I don't know, I just like really like to go paddling, or I really just like to kind of, but I'm not an advocate. I think like I want to help this audience like see themselves as like climate actors, if you will. That sounds so weird. Climate action takers, climate change makers, right? And I think like you,
climate heroes, some might say.
there it is. Ooh, nailed it. Ooh. So like, I don't know, Matt, like, do you like, if you have thoughts on this? I never ask this because I try to infuse,
it's a great question,
the intro, the outro, the show notes, all the other stuff, the framing of these episodes as like, you too can be a change maker. But I think more and more people I've talked to are kind of like, I love these episodes. I listen to them on my bike ride, my run, whatever, maybe in this case, multiple runs. But like, what, like, I don't know. I'm always looking for inroads to like help folks sort of see themselves, if you will, in this conversation. And so I'm curious.
I love it. Okay,
what you
I'm
think?
gonna go. No, there's so many things, because I really don't want to. I don't want to be too simplistic about this.
I know.
But one of the things I would say first and foremost is recognize. I think a good place to start from is recognizing your own power. And it could be as simple. Let me take a step back. it's really easy for us day to day to just go through the motions and not think that it matters. Like, oh, I'm going to go on a walk outside. And no one cares about that. And no one would want to join me for that walk. And also, it is nice to have those moments for ourselves.
Yeah.
But I do think just starting from a place of you, listener, you already matter. Your voice matters, your power matters, your invitations to others to be part of really cool things matter. So, whether that's inviting someone along on your bike ride, whether that's sending, this podcast to a friend or to a few friends, or putting this on your social media. Um, a lot of people are afraid to like be human and to share parts of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've realized is that as vulnerable and scary as it can be, that when you share even something as simple as like, hey, I love to go for a run. Does anyone else like doing that? Or does anyone have any tips for running? Like, I'm just picturing like Instagram story with like a little question box or something.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, here's a piece of me that I, you know, love to do text the group chat. Does anyone want to join in? Like, that actually helps, because
Mm-hmm.
we are under this false impression that everything is about numbers and scale. And I don't have 1 million followers or even 100,000. Or even like 50,000, right? But I think one of the points I want to get across to people is that you don't need to be exceptional to do really powerful things and to use your power. You don't need to have a ton of followers. You could make an impact with one person, and that could go a long way.
Yeah.
And, I often personally for myself think of myself as that example, because whether it's, Naleli Kobo as an example, or that panel that I went to, well, that panel that I mentioned from the Climate Reality Project earlier, like, helped motivate me to be out doing what I'm doing now. And then look at that ripple effects. Like, I don't even know how many millions of people that I've been able to reach through my work to date, tens of millions even. And so, you never know even how like influencing one person can make an impact. I mentioned the friend, really going back further, the friends who told me to go to Climate Reality Project, who's like that one specific person. His name's Ashton. We haven't talked in forever. I should probably tell him what I'm up to now and how he's to give him credit. But like that is just the thing I'd say is like, start with one person, start with like your immediate community. You don't need to do everything. It is worthwhile. But also listen to other people's experiences and stories to understand why, like why they might not be doing it already, what their hesitations might be. Ask friends questions about like why. I don't know. There's a gentle way to do this, but like I was gonna say why they don't get outdoors, or why they don't do it, or like what their better yet, what their relationship is with the outdoors. One of my favorite questions to ask, not even necessarily in social settings, but in talks and workshops and the like, is what comes to mind when you think of climate change? But like, what comes to mind when you think of the outdoors? What comes to mind when you think of like insert local park here? I just think having more conversations about these things and talking more about these things, and maybe that's the theme of what I'm saying as my advice, like having more conversations with people about these topics is one great simple way of inviting others in. And, also just like explicitly inviting others to join you in the things that you love could be really nice and joyful, because what's better than doing the things that you love? It's doing the things you love with the people you love. Or making new friends along the way. So that's kind of my advice, I'd say. But again, like back to the really tangible, like just, sorry Nike, but like just do it. Just do it. Like, please just do it, like right now. Like, don't sit on it, don't overthink it. Yes, you could spend time with your climate action Venn diagram and thinking about like your ideal way of adding purpose, but like you could also just send this podcast link to someone right now as you're listening to it, or post it right now as you're listening to it, or text a friend and be like, hey, I'm taking a bike ride. Like, would you want to do that with me sometime? Like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
I love that. I love that. That's so great. I love I might add that into my regular rotation. Like, what comes to mind when you think of the outdoors?
Yeah.
Or like something, sort of like because I feel like I often ask people, like, if I'm interviewing someone who's maybe a professional athlete at something, it's sort of like, well, I'm like, oh, talk to me about like what you're training for versus, like what comes to mind for you. But actually those stories are often the most, I feel like, impactful. We have the question on Trail Ahead. What does playing outside mean to you? That was our first question for everybody. And it was like, we got such good answers, because you have
That's
it really
so interesting.
people go back, same with, I guess, aha moment, people go back a little bit. That's kind of why I designed it that way. But like with playing outside, like 9 times out of 10 people would be like, it was like, I'm 3 years old and I'm like in the garden, my mom's like there with me or whatever. It's like those memories that we hold so dearly. And anyways, it's interesting.
Yeah, memories we hold dearly, and also it's important to like bring those, it's good when those things can be more in the present. We don't need to, we're able to find joy and fun and play and like connection with nature and each other outside or inside, even as adults too. And so I love, that's the whole other podcast for us to do.
We have like 10 podcasts we need to do, which is funny because we've already done like double a podcast in this. Okay. The last question for you is one that I asked in the Climate Strides prompt as well, but in Climate Strides, I don't have the same parameters. So as you recall, in Climate Strides, it's introduce yourself, tell us your aha moment on climate, and share your favorite climate solution. On the podcast, I say, what is your favorite climate solution that's not your own? And that's because I remember that you shared, I think it was storytelling was your favorite climate solution, but maybe
I roll my eyes.
You roll your eyes.
Like limiting me. No, this is good.
No, but so as you can understand now, the reason I say that's not your own is because we've usually spent an hour or more, in this case, much more, talking about that solution. And so I'm curious, like very excited to ask you this too, because you are at Project Drawdown. You see all these solutions like every day kind of right in front of you, but what would you say is your favorite climate solution that's not maybe storytelling?
Oh yeah.
I'll put that parameter on it.
Okay. You might not be surprised to hear this, and maybe this isn't a fair response, but I'm going with it anyway, because at Project Drawdown, we have focused, our science team is focused on identifying like nearly 100 climate solutions in the world today. And I feel like, kind of paralleling with just some of my passion for these diverse like ensemble casts, growing up in the cartoons and superheroes and all these things that I would take in. Like, I love that there are nearly 100 climate solutions in the world, and those are my, like, science is my favorite climate solution in the sense that oddly I do feel like it's still unfortunately underrated in the conversations on what change we need. Because we do have conversations about policy, or policymakers have those conversations. We do have conversations about certain like flashier quote unquote solutions, whether or not they're based in the science. And there are certain things that people really gravitate to and think about more immediately. Like I think about, like, we need all of it is sort of the point I'm making. But I think about electric vehicles as one example where it's like, well, we're not going to save the world by like having all electric vehicle, like everyone having an electric vehicle, or we're not going to save the world alone by, everyone, like insert single thing here. We need all of it. And that's what I love about the science. is that it really does help us know what we need and how we can be impactful.
Hmm.
And so it's not one climate solution, but a bunch of climate solutions. But I guess science, like I have a deep appreciation for it and a love for it. And I, at times it's not always the most clearly communicated, but when it is,
Yeah.
and when it bridges with the stories, when it bridges with the communities, when it bridges with like all these things we need, it's so beautiful and powerful, and it's a source of truth. And in today's world, especially, we need these sources of truth. So when I think about, like, for instance, when I think about the other storytellers out there, whether it's folks that we'd meet at the Hollywood Climate Summit or with organizations like there's a great organization called the Sustainable Entertainment Alliance, which brings together a bunch of these different platforms like Paramount and Fox and Netflix and NBC Universal and Amazon Studios, and the list goes on, right? Like, I just want everyone to look to the science to inform how we show up and to inform the stories we tell and to inform like what we do, because we want to save the planet, as corny as that might sound or as cliche as that is. And we can't do that if we're not going in the right direction. And so that's where being guided by the science is so powerful. Like the stories I tell are guided by the science. And so if I can't say that storytelling is what's my and I don't even know if I'd use the word solution as much, because I think of the science-based solutions as solutions, but like the science is what guides kind of the stories that I put out there that I find the world needs. And I love it as much as it's conflicted me, like despite the challenging science classes that I've really struggled in and other things. Like it is cool. It's cool even if we don't know how to always communicate it.
Totally. To be clear, too, I loved both of these answers. No one has ever said science as their solution, and I love it. No, I love that because it's at the core of so much. And storytelling, when you said storytelling at Climate Strides, I was like, oh, yes. Like, yeah, it is a climate solution. And it made me think about storytelling in a different light. So you have shaped my worldview over the past 9 months since we've met.
Yeah, ask me again another time and tell me I can't respond with science and stories, and then I'll probably say like people, or something. I'll find
there you
something.
Go.
But
see, when that's what we call in like the design thinking world, like is a constraint. I put a constraint on there. And then we got something else out of it. So, Matt Scott, my goodness, thank you so much for your time. This has been like, what a joy to get to spend this much time together. Plus, because we didn't even start recording right away, as we alluded to. But really to learn more about you and hear about you, not having you be an interviewer, like you're the interviewee, is very cool. So thank you for everything you shared.
I appreciate that, and I just feel like I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
That I want to ask, and I honestly don't know what it is yet. But I guess I'm curious, Addie, interviewer to interviewer, like, what have you learned through this journey as someone who's like I'm curious if there's anything that like jumps out, if there's one like core lesson that jumps out for you from this interviewing journey, whether it's with the trail ahead, whether it's with where the climate things are. I'll also say that I'm doing this thing right now where I am vamping to give you more time to think about the question that you didn't expect for me to give.
It well.
I'm curious again, like if there's a big lesson that you've learned along this journey.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love it. I mean, I'll say, I don't know if it's a lesson, but I'll tell you how I feel in these interviews. So I sort of alluded to this already. And even today, I'm not going to lie, same thing. I always get a little, even though I've now done probably 75 plus podcast interviews, which is crazy to say.
It is.
Crazy. And I've done more, panel hosting and moderating, whatever. And I still get nervous or butterflies or however you want to say it. And then
Mm-hmm.
I sit down, and the second I'm on with someone, and not even recording already, but it's just like
Yeah.
it all dissipates. And I always truly, and again, this conversation too, it reaffirms why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like it reaffirms
Mm.
why Where the Climate Things Are exists. It reaffirms Trailhead. I'll be honest, like, the topic of Trailhead.
Yeah.
I am a white woman. I'm talking about race. We're recording that topic. Like that was like, I mean, when I look at it from afar, I'm like, yeah, I was very, very nervous to like get something wrong, right? Or like say
Mm-hmm.
something that wasn't, but that was also the whole point. And so like it didn't even like strike me as a choice to be able to be like, well, maybe I don't have to do it this way. Maybe we can do this. I was just like, yeah, I'm all in. If I get it wrong, I get it wrong. That's like what we need to
Right.
be getting uncomfortable with, right? But it does lend itself to like, now you'd think like, or I would hope that like this many interviews in, I'd be sort of totally fine, super confident. I have my themes that I want to ask you. No, it's like it's a new journey every time. It's a new adventure. We had a far ranging conversation today, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. Like
Mm-hmm.
it sort of goes back to what you said about you can do as much research as you want, but it always is like in the moment. It's the beauty of being flexible and going with the flow and letting like the guests and making a comfortable space, I think. And I think that like I just am ending even this conversation today being like, how lucky am I to get to spend time with these change makers like you? How lucky, how cool is it that like this platform now exists because I didn't wait. Like Where the Climate Trail Ahead was like planned for like months and months. Where the Climate Things Are was like kind of percolating in my brain, but then I just sort of was like, it was like, don't get ready, get
Mm.
started. Like I just knew I had to
Mm.
put it out into the world. It wasn't perfect. It was sort of like what you said about like sharing something about yourself or sharing the podcast with a friend, or don't wait till it's perfect, like just go. And I think like the two different approaches to these podcasts has taught me so much about interviewing and about how conversations can just be beautiful and deep and and like interesting and inspiring and introspective, even if it's like planned for 7 months, or if it's an off the cuff two friends sitting down and chatting. And so it's so awesome. And yeah, I like love this gig. This job that I've
Uh,
given myself. This is
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
No, I love
Yeah.
this. I
Thanks for
love
asking
this.
that.
No, thank you. That incredible Addie Thompson. Thank you for having me on Where the Climate Things Are.